Chapter 10 Parenting Adolescents. This chapter covers developmental changes in adolescence, physical and hormonal changes, neurological and cognitive changes, social changes, a theory about peer influence, problems for adolescents and their parents, automobile accidents, sexual initiation, contraception use and pregnancy, electronic media problems, eating problems and body dissatisfaction, school dropouts, substance use and abuse, mental health problems, youth violence and delinquency, how parents help teens navigate adolescence, staying connected via positive, warm relationships, open communication, monitoring knowledge, appropriate limits, other ways parents influence their teenagers, limits of parental influence on teens. Adolescence can be a difficult stage of life for both teens and their parents. Teens are going through many physical changes and are struggling with identity formation. Beneath the surface of their skulls, their brains are also going through changes. These changes result in storm and stress for some teenagers and can be manifested in a variety of potential problems. Some problems reflect risk-taking behavior, such as automobile accidents, smoking, binge drinking, and unprotected sexual activity. Other problems include school failure, eating disorders, mental health problems, and violence. The evidence reveals that parents continue to play an important role in guiding their adolescents' development. Through authoritative parenting and maintaining positive relationships, parents can continue to influence their children's development. Other key attributes of parenting success during this age period include maintaining good communication patterns, effectively monitoring the teen, and using appropriate control techniques. During this developmental period, parents need to modify their parenting to grant increasing autonomy to their teenagers. Parents must also deal with other sources of influences, such as the peer group. Although this chapter has focused on the many challenges and potential problems that adolescents face, it should be remembered that a majority of teens experience few or no major problems during these tumultuous years. Their parents deserve at least some of the credit. Thought questions: in what ways can parents, mentors, and educators use findings from adolescent brain research to modify expectations or help guide adolescents more effectively? How well can you predict which teenagers will become rebellious? What personal and family characteristics contribute to or reduce the likelihood of that? Although the chapter delineates clear differences between parental psychological control versus granting autonomy, what are some examples of parental behavior in which this distinction becomes blurred? In what ways can parents exhibit trust while still monitoring their adolescents? Chapter Glossary: Authority conflict: when an adolescent is disobedient and defiant to figures of authority. Comorbid: two or more disorders in an individual. Covert aggression: one pathway of adolescent aggression that begins with minor dishonesty but escalates into more serious acts such as theft. Graduated driver licensing laws: laws that gradually remove restrictions on adolescent drivers, such as number of passengers. Imaginary audience: adolescents' heightened sense of self-consciousness. Overt aggression: one type of aggressive adolescent pattern of behavior that begins with minor aggressive acts and then escalates into serious violence. Personal fable: the belief in some adolescents that what they experience is unique to them. Protective factors: conditions or circumstances that promote healthy behavior and well-being. Chapter Preview: True or false? Adolescence is a time of substantial neurological changes. Parent-child conflict peaks during adolescence. 25% of adolescents think about suicide. The adolescent years have been described in colorful ways. G. Stanley Hall, one of the fathers of American psychology, and a pioneer of research into adolescence, called it a time of heightened storm and stress, 1904, Volume 1 Peaseyle. It has also been referred to as the tumultuous and awkward years. As youth grow into the adolescent years, the interpersonal equilibrium established with parents is often disrupted. It is a developmental stage that can be characterized by mood changes and risky behavior. Some researchers differentiate adolescence into 3 developmental periods: early adolescence 10-13 years, middle adolescence 14-17, and late adolescence 18 to early 20s. Smetana, Campion Barr, and Metzger, 2006. In this chapter, we will focus mostly on middle adolescence. Many parents approach the adolescent years with trepidation, perhaps inspired by autobiographic memories, stereotypes, and misinformation. Common stereotypes describe teens as being difficult, oppositional, and moody due to raging hormones, among other things. For all these reasons, parents are wary of the adolescent years. To be sure, adolescence is a time of change, but it does not necessarily result in rebellious youth. Although some parents erroneously believe their child-rearing duties are over once adolescence hits, the evidence indicates that in certain ways, this time period is especially important for parent-child relationships. Parents need to be responsive to the many types of changes that are going on with the adolescent, including physical, cognitive, self-concept, and social. Developmental changes in adolescence. The core task for the adolescent is identity formation, whereby the individual negotiates the transition between the safety of childhood and the complex, boundless world of adulthood. For example, Erickson 1993, Schwartz, Donnellan, Ravitt, Lux, and Zambonga 2013. During late adolescence and early adulthood, individuals embark on their life paths, whether they are engaged in such activities as pursuing education, beginning full-time employment, establishing a family, or joining the military. See Photo 10.1. This identity formation process occurs among a sea of changes, physical, neurological, and cognitive, as well as social, physical and hormonal changes. In several ways, parents' relations with their adolescents are linked to developmental changes. The most obvious indicator of development is the physical transformation associated with puberty. Puberty has long been regarded as the hallmark of adolescence. Sussman and Dawn, 2012. In actuality, the surge in sex hormones that precipitates puberty occurs in middle childhood years. See Box 10.1. Physical changes include emergence of pubic hair, changes in body shape and fat distribution, and breast development, and the onset of menstruation in females. The median age of onset of menarche in girls in the United States is now 12.4 years, with the mean age being younger for African American and Latino girls than for white girls. Chumlier et al., 2003. Breast development can begin as early as age 7 in girls and even earlier for African American girls. Bairo et al., 2010. Physical changes in males include emergence of body, facial, and pubic hair, growth of muscle, and change in voice, body shape, and testicular size and function. Boys go through puberty about 18 to 24 months later than girls. Patton and Viner, 2007. Box 10.1. Raging adolescent hormones. Parents are quick to attribute adolescent mood swings to raging hormones. But what is the evidence that the swings are due to endocrine changes? Surprisingly, the evidence that hormones are responsible for dramatic mood swings is weak. Instead, research reviews indicate that biology does indeed contribute to emotional volatility and negative moods, but the relation is complex. Hormone levels interact with other variables, including the brain, peers, parents, and situational factors, rather than simply and directly influencing behavior. Pepper and Dahl, 2013. For example, Pennsylvania State University researchers tested whether testosterone levels in children and adolescents from 6 to 18 years old were linked to two types of behavior: taking risks, for example, doing something dangerous for the thrill, damaging property, skipping school, or getting drunk, and depression. Booth, Johnson, Granger, Crowter, and McHale, 2003. They used quick, non-invasive saliva tests for testosterone. They found little evidence for direct effects of testosterone on behavior. Instead, the investigators determined that the quality of parent-child relationships moderated the negative effects of testosterone. That is, in families with good parent-child relationships, children high in testosterone did not engage in risk-taking behavior or experience depression. However, in families with poorer quality parent-child relationships, there was evidence of testosterone-related adjustment problems. This study provides supporting evidence for the ecological model of development because the social context, that is, quality of relationship with parents, moderates how hormones are expressed. Many factors influence the onset of puberty, including genes, culture, socioeconomic status, says, diet, exercise, and stress. Ellis, 2004. A provocative prediction based in evolutionary theory was proposed by J. Belsky, Larry Steinberg, and Patricia Draper in 1991. They hypothesized that the home environment, and, particularly, parenting behavior would influence the onset of puberty. Families characterized by stress and harsh parenting should have daughters who attained puberty earlier, in contrast to warm and emotionally supportive family environments. In a recent test of that prediction, Belsky and his colleagues, Belsky, Houts, and Firin, 2010, found that adolescent females who had insecure attachments as infants tended to have earlier onset and completion of menarche than girls with secure attachments. The timing of physical maturation has many more repercussions on teenagers than simply their bodies. It influences boys' and girls' psychological well-being, that is, self-esteem, and, conversely, the onset of emotional problems, that is, depression. For example, adolescents who think they look older than their peers can experience emotional distress. Resnick et al. 1997. However, gender plays a determining role. Boys who mature early and thereby grow taller and heavier are at a distinct advantage for playing many sports. Consequently, early maturing boys can receive a positive psychological impact from their physical changes, though many early maturing boys do show psychosocial adjustment and behavioral problems. Mensa et al. 2013. Early maturing girls, who generally are heavier than late maturing girls, are at risk for experiencing emotional problems. A recent study of more than 11,000 girls found that early menarche was associated with being friends with deviant peers and engaging in more aggression. Mrug et al. 2014. However, early maturing children were also likely to have exhibited problems as preschoolers and middle schoolers. Mensa et al. 2013. Neurological and cognitive changes during the period of puberty. Adolescents are also undergoing substantial neurological and cognitive changes. Preview question. As one neurologist described it, brain structure goes through explosive changes during the teen years. Gede, 2004, page 83. With the advent of the non-invasive magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, and functional magnetic resonance imaging (fMRI) techniques, detailed images of the adolescent brain and brain functioning are now available. The adolescent brain undergoes several types of changes. See Figure 10.1. Neurodevelopmentally changes in adolescence are variable, and can be grouped into three major categories of change. 1. Adolescent nonspecific, referring to brain development that begins in early childhood and continues relatively evenly through young adulthood. 2. Adolescent emergent, meaning brain development that happens at adolescence and levels off. And 3. Adolescent specific, where brain development peaks at adolescence and then drops off. Casey, 2013. There is both structural and functional remodeling of the limbic and cortical regions of the brain during adolescence. Eland and Romeo, 2013. For example, brain scans indicate that in two locations on the cortex, prefrontal cortex, and parietal lobe, there is a linear increase in white matter containing myelinated axon cells responsible for neural communication. In addition, there is a decrease in gray matter consisting of the cell bodies of neurons and dendrites. These brain changes are significant. They relate to behavioral variations in such key areas as self-control, sensitivity to social evaluation, and decision-making. For example, Albert, Cheen, and Steinberg, 2013, Casey and Cord, 2013, Somerville, 2013. Many of the neurological changes that occur during adolescence are thought to underlie increases in executive function or the capacity to control and coordinate thoughts and behavior. The prefrontal cortex is also associated with controlling impulses, weighing potential consequences of decisions, prioritizing, and strategizing. The prefrontal cortex is also involved in self-awareness and perspective-taking, the latter ability underlying the capacity for empathy. There is also evidence for development in the brain's emotion processing and cognitive appraisal, the limbic and frontal cortical areas related to engaging in risky or reckless behavior, and all too common feature of adolescent behavior that parents fear. Changing adolescent brains may also be at higher risk for the effects of stress. In Eland and Romeo's 2013 review of the data, they concluded that the adolescent brain may be particularly sensitive to stress-induced neurobehavioral dysfunction negatively impacting adolescent mental health. Other developing brain structures have implications for adolescent behavior. The medial prefrontal cortex, MPFC, and the striatum are both continuing to develop during the adolescent period. The striatum, a part of the brain associated with risk-taking and reward, gradually matures over the adolescence. Albert et al., 2013, Casey and Caudle, 2013. A recent MRI study of adolescents found them to be more self-conscious than other age groups about their images being projected to peers. Markers of neurophysiological response included both autonomic nervous system peak activation and brain activity in the MPFC and the striatum. Somerville et al. 2013. Adolescent cognitive abilities become more sophisticated during this phase of development, resulting in thinking that is more abstract, multidimensional, and relativistic. The cognitive developmental theorist Jean Piaget recognized this change, positing what he called the formal operation stage of cognition. Teens tend to view rules, whether set by parents or others in authority positions, as social conventions, subjective and arbitrary. Thus, parental requests to do chores or clean up messy rooms, a common source of conflict with adolescents, are often regarded by teens as unnecessary. Note: does telling them why help? For their part, parents often get upset when teenagers challenge their rules, requests, or values. Despite improving cognitive sophistication, teens' reasoning abilities are not necessarily adult-like. Teen thinking can be characterized by egocentrism, which is linked to two characteristics of adolescent cognition. First is their heightened sense of self-consciousness, dubbed the imaginary audience, because teens often erroneously believe others are watching and thinking about them. Then they must be a special person. Second is the teenage belief in what has been called their personal fable, or the belief that what they experience is unique to them.
E.g., Goossens, Beyers, Emmen, en Van Aken, 2002.
These reasoning processes can feed the belief of invincibility. Problems other teens have, for example, pregnancy, car wrecks, cannot happen to them. Sanders, 2013. Cognitive changes also contribute to changes in identity. Adolescence brings an increased desire for independence and responsibility, as well as newfound access to money. Consequently, many teens work for pay. 28% of high school students work during their high school years. Davis, 2012. Typically, they find part-time jobs as sales clerks, cashiers, waiters, janitors, or child care providers. Employment provides a variety of benefits, including spending money or money for the family, interpersonal and occupation-specific skills, arenas to develop discipline and responsibility, and opportunities to enhance self-confidence. But hazards also exist in terms of the time work takes away from school and extracurricular activities. In addition, the working teen may experience increased stress and time pressure and be exposed to the possibility of job-related injuries. Resnick et al. 1997. Another manifestation of adolescent independence, or the adolescent desire for independence from parents, is expressed in hair length, clothing, tattoos or body piercings, or substance abuse. Teens may be experimenting with a couple of ways to flex their independence: 1. Autonomy and discovering themselves, or 2. Directly challenging parental control. From the parent's perspective, these behavioral expressions, whatever the source, but especially this second source, are often perceived as rejections of parental values, the family's way of life, and of authority. Steinberg, 2001. Social changes. In addition to physical and neurological cognitive changes, a third area of rapid development is in social relationships. Given that adolescents seek distance and autonomy from their parents as they form their identities, they gravitate toward peers. By the time adolescence arrives, teens are only spending about 40% of their non-school hours engaged in homework, chores, or paid work. The rest of the time they are watching TV, surfing the internet, socializing, or engaging in sports or structured activities. All told, adolescents may spend about 7.5 hours a day using electronic devices, much of it in communication with peers. Rediert, Foe, and Roberts, 2010. See Photo 10.2. Along with an increasing orientation toward peers comes a change in emotional distance from parents. This distance is commonly thought to give rise to increases in conflicts with parents. Indeed, adolescent parent conflict is common over such mundane issues as refusing to pick up rooms, resisting chores, fighting with siblings, and failing to complete homework. Smetana, Dadis, and Chuang, 2003. However, contrary to stereotypes, conflicts with parents are not the highest during adolescence. A systematic review of the literature found the rate of conflict actually decreases significantly from pre or early adolescence 10 to 12 years, to middle adolescence 13 to 16 years, although the intensity increases slightly. Lauren, Coy, and Collins, 1998. Furthermore, only a small proportion of adolescents have highly conflicted relationships with their parents and engage in extremely rebellious behavior. ranging from 5% to 15%, depending on the sample. Smetana, Campion Bar et al., 2006. Adolescence is marked by the increasing time spent with and the growing importance of peers. Recreational, athletic, academic, and social activities are spent with youth of roughly the same age. Peers hold an immediate and powerful attraction. Friends become emotional confidants, provide listening and advice, and serve as models of behavior and attitude. Wenzel and Caldwell, 1997. On the other hand, peers can also be negative influences. It is most often friends who introduce teens to tobacco, alcohol and drugs, sex, and violence. A theory about peer influence. One controversial view that recognizes the important role that peers can have on adolescents is the group socialization theory. According to the theory, mentioned in chapters 2 and 4, it is peers who are the most important social environmental influence on teens' development, not parents. The theory stemmed from a mother's observation of her adolescent daughters. One daughter had a relatively smooth adolescence, but her younger daughter experienced considerable turmoil and rebelliousness. The fact that her younger teen was adopted prompted the mother to think about development from a behavioral genetics perspective. The mother was Judith Rich Harris, a former Harvard psychology graduate student who became a writer of developmental textbooks. In an effort to provide a theoretical answer to what made her daughters behave so differently, she integrated research from behavioral genetics, anthropology, and sociology, as well as social and evolutionary psychology. Her solution was group socialization theory. Harris, 1995-1998. At the heart of Harris's theory is a strong social environmental perspective, but not from parents. Although parents may be important determinants of behavior inside the family home, Harris believes that once a child is out of the confines of the home, it is peers who become the dominant developmental influence. Harris, 1998. According to Harris, parents, with the exception of providing genes, have little or no effect on the psychological characteristics that children will have as adults, including personality, emotional regulation, behavior, or cognitions. Recall from Chapter 2 that human behavioral genetics research indicates heritability from parent to child accounts for 30% to 60% of the variance in personality characteristics. The rest of the environmental influence comes either from a shared, common to all the children in the home, or unshared, unique to that child, home environment. Harris argued that the shared and unshared environment has little importance in the face of peers. That is, peers outstrip parents. She believes the influence of peers has been underestimated, along with other non-familial agents, such as the movies and television. Harris does not refute the studies that find that parent-adolescent behavior is correlated. She just reinterprets them. For example, studies that link harsh parenting to delinquent adolescent behavior can be interpreted as revealing a genetic predisposition toward aggressive behavior, that is, aggressiveness being passed on in genes from parent to child, rather than revealing a cause based in parenting methods. Further, the associations between parent and child reveal child effects rather than parent effects. So Harris believes parents react to their adolescents' aggression and acting out with harsh punishment, tough love, rather than negatively influencing them to act out because of harsh rules and regulations. Harris, 1998. Note 1. Genetics. 2. Parental reactions. As might be expected, Harris's theory has elicited strong reactions from the research community. Steven Pinker, a well-known Harvard University psychologist, gushed that it will come to be seen as a turning point in the history of psychology. Pinker, 1998. Peasley. However, many developmental psychologists and parents rejected Harris's theory on various grounds. See Box 10.2. The jury is still out, but most psychologists believe that parents continue to influence their adolescents' behavior and development in many ways. However, part of Harris's theory is undoubtedly accurate. Sometimes peer groups do lead other youth off their positive developmental trajectories and onto negative paths. Box 10.2 Evaluating the Group Socialization Theory. Harris's controversial book, 1998, attracted a lot of attention from the popular media and researchers. Not surprisingly, many developmental psychologists found her theory to be highly inaccurate by discounting the crucial roles that parents play in promoting positive development. Some researchers also pointed out the potentially dangerous implications. Among their comments, if parents do not matter in how their children turn out, then it follows that it does not matter how parents rear their children. To date, There has not been much empirical support for her theory. C.T. Lowland 1997, but many critics, for example Collins, Maccabee, Steinberg, Hetherington, and Bornstein 2000, Gottlieb 2003, Maccabee 2000, Vandal 2000. The following procedural or research methodology reasons stand out among the critics. Her research review is incomplete or too simplified. Pertinent research on siblings, teachers, and friendships is ignored. Behavioral genetics research is limited by its assumptions and computations. Gene-environment interactions were not examined. And among the more general critics, parental influence over peer group exposure was not considered. Parents affect, and can even gatekeep, the choice of and access to peers. Parents influence the behaviors, attitudes, and decisions of their children in particular domains that peers do not or cannot influence. Harris focused only on adolescent outcomes and failed to take a longer lifespan developmental perspective. As we have seen, adolescence is a time of many changes, including physical, cognitive, and social. Some of the behaviors that adolescents engage in that are risky and problematic, and that Harris thought were so revealing of peer influence, will be considered next. Following a short discussion of 8 types of problems, we will then consider what parents should do to avoid the problems or effectively deal with them. Problems for adolescents and their parents. What are some of the potential pitfalls of adolescence that parents fear? Some problems may be short-lived, such as experimentation with cigarettes or marijuana, and sometimes behaviors become habit-forming or lead to serious problems or consequences. Parents are especially fearful of more long-term or even fatal consequences of their teens' behavior. Given the particular combination of emerging adult drivers, risk-taking behavior, and poor judgment, adolescents are a particular risk for death from preventable causes, accident, homicide, and suicide. The teen death rate, for 15 to 19-year-olds, is 49 per 100,000. Only about a quarter of these deaths are due to illness, cancer, and heart disease. About 3/4 of adolescent deaths come from car accidents, homicides, and suicides. Car fatalities account for the vast majority of these adolescent preventable deaths, with 3 times as many deaths as the other 2 causes. Annie E. Casey Foundation, 2014. Other, non-fatal problems include drug and substance abuse, exposure to violence, pregnancy, and dropping out of high school. Some of these troubles will be described in more detail below. The list is not exhaustive. For example, teens are also susceptible to other problems, including gang involvement, gambling, and materialism. Automobile accidents. One of the developmental milestones in adolescence is becoming eligible to obtain a driver's license, in most states at age 16. Automobile driving promotes autonomy, independence, and responsibility. However, it is also dangerous. Car accidents involving teenagers are the most common cause of death for individuals between the ages of 16 and 19. In 2010, every day, 7 teens died from motor vehicle crashes, resulting in 2,700 deaths. Another 282,000 teens sustained non-fatal injuries. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2014b. Investigations into teen car accidents determined that 2 risk factors were 1. Driving with 2+ friends in the car, and 2. Driving at night. Why do adolescents get into accidents? In a nutshell, teens do not have driving experience. They underestimate hazardous driving situations, fail to recognize dangerous conditions, and may not wear seat belts. They also tailgate, drive too fast, and are distracted by talking on a cell phone or even typing text messages. Another cause of automobile accidents is alcohol. In a study of 17,000 high school seniors, 28% reported that within the past 14 days, they drove or rode with a driver who was under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, or some other illicit drug. O'Malley and Johnston, 2013. Drinking is implicated as a cause in 20% of fatal car crashes involving adolescent males. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Vital Signs, 2012. Thus, adolescents engage in a variety of risky driving practices. One effective solution has been to institute graduated driver licensing laws, as described in Box 10.3. Box 10.3 promoting safer teenage drivers with graduated driver licensing laws. One effective way to combat the fact that novice drivers have higher crash rates is through graduated driver licensing (GDL) laws. These laws consist of differentiating drivers into the learner stage and then intermediate stage before giving the driver full privileges. Common components of the law include restrictions or bans on nighttime driving, the number of passengers' cell phone use. All 50 states and many countries have enacted parts of these types of laws. The laws were based on research into the factors that increased or decreased the risk of crashes among teenagers. GDL laws are successful. They have reduced automobile accidents by teen drivers by 20% to 40%. Shope, 2007. Sexual initiation, contraception use, and pregnancy. Premarital sexual intercourse among older adolescents is widespread. By age 19, most U.S. youth will have had sexual intercourse at a rate of 71%. Guttmacher Institute, 2013. Sexual activity is also common among younger teens. 33% of 16-year-olds have had sex, see Figure 10.2. Early sexual debut is associated with various problems for the teenager. Initiation at early ages is associated with multiple partners and unprotected intercourse. In turn, sex without contraceptives can result in two types of serious problems: sexually transmitted infections, STIs, and pregnancies, see Photo 10.3. Each year, 750,000 female teens aged 15 to 19 years old become pregnant. Two-thirds of these young women are 18 and 19 years old, 68 per 1,000 teenage females. The teen pregnancy rate has declined substantially from 1990, when the rate peaked at 117 per 1,000 teenage females. The decline is primarily due to improved contraceptive use, and, to a lesser extent, the decision to delay sexual activity. Guttmacher Institute, 2013. Electronic media problems. Adolescents seek excitement, arousal, and intense stimulation. Dahl, 2004. Consequently, electronic media, including cell phones, tablet devices, internet, and TV, is a dominant focus of teen attention. According to the Pew Internet survey of 800 nationally representative teens, most adolescents, 93%, go online. More than 80% of 16-year-olds have cell phones, about 80% own an iPod or MP3 player, as well as a gaming device, and 82% use online social networks. Lenhart, Purcell, Smith, and Zicker, 2010. In terms of time, teens spend more than 11 hours a day using a variety of media. Rudiert et al., 2010. Although television viewing and the electronic media in general can have positive effects on youth, too much screen time is a problem. For instance, although gaming may enhance hand-eye coordination, a common concern from parents is that time spent in front of the screens means time cannot be spent in active activities. Video gamers spend 30% less time reading and 34% less time doing homework than non-gamers, and 9% less time interacting with parents or friends. Cummings and Vandwater, 2007. Watching a lot, for example, 5 hours of television each day, is also associated with such problems as early sexual initiation, obesity, sleep loss, consumerism, substance use, violence, and decreases in executive function.
Collins et al., 2004, Koopman, Lieverman, en Kraak, 2005.
For example, Council on Communications and Media, 2013. Teen texting can pose another problem. Youth send an average of 60 messages a day, Lenhart, 2012. According to a study that analyzed the content of teen messages, the most common type of messaging was positive or neutral. However, 14% were negative comments about others or groups, another 2% were about sex, and less than 1% of messages were about physical or social aggression and substance use. Underwood, Ehrenreich, Moore, Solis, and Brinkley, 2014. The negative talk was not inconsequential. The senders of those messages were more likely to report internalizing problems, anxious depression, and somatic physical complaints. In addition, teens who text about antisocial topics were found to subsequently engage in more rule-breaking and aggressive behavior than teens who did not. Ehrenreich, Underwood, and Ackerman, 2014. Eating problems and body dissatisfaction. There are two common types of adolescent eating problems: eating too much and eating too little. Eating too much, in conjunction with a lack of activity, results in obesity. Child and adolescent obesity is a widespread problem in the United States and worldwide. For example, Hughes, Sheriff, Lawler, Ness, and Riley, 2011. In the United States, according to a national study with more than 9,000 children and adolescents, 31.8% of children aged 2 to 19 years are overweight and 16.9% are obese as defined by a body mass index (BMI) at or above the 95th percentile. Ogden, Carroll, Kit, and Flegel, 2014. Hispanic boys had the highest percent of obesity, 24%, and Asian girls had the lowest, 5.6%. The good news is that this rate, though high, has not significantly increased over the past 8 years. Obesity is a complex problem involving family lifestyle patterns, family and peer dynamics, and child variables, for example, self-control, emotional problems. Harris et al. 2012. The problem typically begins early in life and develops into a habit. Eating high-calorie and supersized foods in front of TV screens has become the norm. As many as 22.8% of children aged 2 through 5 years are overweight. Ogden et al. 2014. By middle childhood, the rate is 1 in 3 children. In a low-income inner-city sample, the rate was found to be even higher. Robbins et al. 2007. Studied over a 2-year period, 29% of 3 to 7-year-old children were found to be overweight, and an additional 19% were at risk of being overweight. Robbins et al. 2007. To simplify classification into categories, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now uses the same index values for both men and women. Obesity in children is associated with a variety of health problems as well as life adjustments. Some of the health problems include juvenile type 1 diabetes, liver failure, heart disease, and a variety of other health problems, even some resulting in death. The opposite type of eating problem evidences itself in the exaggerated desire to be thin. In a culture, the female ideal of extreme thinness is promoted in teen magazines, on television, and in the movies. Teenagers, nearly always girls, with these kinds of disorders typically engage in one of 3 eating patterns as identified in the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-V. 1. Anorexia nervosa, severely limiting food intake such that it is not enough to sustain one's weight. 2. Bulimia nervosa, binge eating followed by efforts to minimize the effects of overeating by vomiting, exercise, or fasting. Or 3. Binge eating disorder, binge eating without the efforts to minimize the effects. By age 20, 13.1% of females will have experienced one type of eating disorder. Stice, Marty, and Rode, 2013. Males also experience eating disorders, but at significantly lower rates. Hudson, Hirapi, Pope, and Kessler, 2007. Eating disorders are often comorbid with other mental health problems, and put the adolescent female at risk for a variety of health and psychological problems. In the process of starving their bodies, teenage girls can delay their normal pubertal development, negatively affect their self-concept and self-esteem, and even cause irreversible organ damage. According to a researcher in Australia, a key variable related to the role of obesity and teen emotional well-being is the role of body dissatisfaction. Being overweight does not necessarily negatively impact a teen's emotional well-being. It only negatively impacts their well-being when they have high levels of body dissatisfaction. In those cases, the teen may experience psychological distress, and their self-esteem may be seriously compromised. Mond, Van den Berg, Boutel, Hannon, and Newmark-Steiner, 2011. School dropouts. In 2011, 7% of teenagers aged 16 to 24 dropped out of high school and have not subsequently earned a General Educational Development GED certificate, U.S. Department of Education, 2013. However, there is great racial disparity in the percentages of dropouts. Hispanic Latinos have a 14% rate, blacks have a 7% rate, and whites have a 5% rate. Although the 2011 rate is down from the 12% rate of 1990, it means more than 1.3 million teenagers are committing economic suicide because they have at least temporarily closed the door on their educational future and getting a job that pays well. Teens who drop out from high school will earn about $2,100,000 less in their lifetime than their peers who get a diploma. Amos, 2008. And a net benefit to taxpayers of $127,000 per graduate. If the dropout rate could be cut in half, it would result in a $90 billion financial benefit per year, according to 2 economists, Levin and Rouse, 2012. In addition to the obvious financial negatives, dropping out of school is associated with a variety of lifestyle problems. Those who leave high school prior to graduation are more likely to consume drugs, commit crimes, be incarcerated, and have health problems than those who do not. Belfield and Levin, 2007. Thus, dropping out of high school has significant repercussions for the teen as well as society. Substance use and abuse. Teens commonly use three types of problematic substances: cigarettes, alcohol, and illegal drugs, primarily marijuana. Prevalence rates are estimated based on results from the Monitoring the Future study that surveyed 46,500 high school students. Johnston, O'Malley, Bachman, and Schulenberg, 2011. When surveyed, it was found that about 20% of high school seniors smoked cigarettes within the past 30 days. The percentage of high school seniors smoking has declined steadily since 1997, when 38% of seniors had smoked. Though cigarette smoking may be on the wane, other types of nicotine ingestion are on the rise. E-cigarettes are gaining popularity with teens and may even serve to promote traditional cigarette smoking. Teen alcohol use is a larger problem than tobacco for various reasons. It is more widely used. The national survey mentioned above determined that 16.6% of teenagers, 12 to 17 years old, had used alcohol in the past month. When they drank, they consumed an average of 4.5 alcoholic drinks. This is called binge drinking, typically defined as consuming 5 or more alcoholic drinks in a short period of time. By the time they are high school seniors, 22% of high school seniors reported binge drinking during the past 30 days. Johnston et al., 2011. Drinking alcohol may be fun and provide a good, momentary escape from problems, but it has potentially serious effects. Alcohol is associated with a variety of problems, including violence, unprotected sexual intercourse, multiple sexual partners, alcohol dependency, and suicide attempts. Alcohol use among college students is even more of a problem. On average, 63.7% of 18 to 22-year-old college students reported alcohol use in the past month. Of those, nearly half, 43.6%, engaged in binge drinking. A smaller percentage, 15.3%, of these students also reported they drank heavily. Binge drinking on 5 or more days in the past month. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration SAMHSA, 2008. Excessive college drinking is not just linked to academic problems, it is also a cause of health problems, injuries and accidents, unsafe sex, date rape, and, in rare cases, death. Hingson, Heron, Winter, and Wechsler, 2005. Other drugs are not consumed as frequently as alcohol. Almost half, 48%, of high school seniors report using some form of illegal drugs in the past 12 months. Most of that illicit drug use is marijuana. However, about 18% of seniors report using cocaine, inhalants, hallucinogens, heroin, or prescription-type medications to get high. Johnston et al., 2011. Access to drugs often comes from peers at school. 1/4, 25%, of students are exposed to illegal drugs at school. Dinks, Cataldi, Lynn Kelly, and Snyder, 2007. Mental health problems. Most adult psychiatric disorders have their origins in childhood or adolescence. Up to 50% begin in adolescence. Belfer, 2008. Mental health problems are surprisingly prevalent in adolescence. More than 1/4, 26.8%, of American youth 12 to 17 years of age received some type of mental health treatment in 2007, SAMHSA, 2008, although all were not diagnosed with a disorder. Mental health problems that begin in adolescence are more likely to involve females in contrast to childhood onset disorders, for example, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD1, where there is a preponderance of males. Zan, Waxy, Shirtcliffe, and Marceau, 2008. Depression is the most common mental health problem evidenced in adolescence. Almost 2 million youth, 8.1% of teens experience a major depressive episode each year. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 2012. The disorder is characterized by a depressed mood, manifest as extreme irritability, prolonged sadness and extended loss of interest, or the inability to take pleasure in activities. Indicators of depression include chronic problems with eating, sleeping, cognitive performance, and emotional well-being. Depression is a particularly serious adolescent onset disorder. Females become depressed almost 3 times as frequently as males. Office of Applied Studies, 2009. Depression is a complex disorder because it is multi-determined. It can be caused by genetic, biological, familial, and extrafamilial factors or a combination. Depression does not just affect behavior, but it can be debilitating and leads to the development of suicidal ideation, thoughts, and suicide attempts. In one study, 25% of adolescents reported they had thought about suicide at some time, 33% of girls, and 18% of boys, and 13% of girls and 6% of boys made suicide attempts. Eisenberg, Olson, Newmark, Steiner, Story, and Beringer, 2004. Preview question: when a large sample of high school students reported on their emotional health in the past year, the rates were considerably lower, but nevertheless alarming. 5.1% of female and 2.0% of male adolescents disclosed suicide attempts. Borowski, Ireland, and Resnick, 2001. Suicidal thoughts and attempts are clear and alarming calls for help. Vox 10.5 describes actions you can take in responding to an adolescent or friend who expresses suicidal thoughts. Vox 10.5 I wish I were dead. Responding to a friend's suicidal thoughts. How would you respond to a friend who is despondent and wants to die? Sometimes it is obvious because the individual will say something like, "I want to die," or "I'm going to shoot myself." In other cases, it is subtle. There may be indirect statements of severely low self-esteem, including, "I'm causing all the problems in the family," or "My friends don't need me. All I do is cause trouble." You may see indications that your friend has engaged in cutting or other forms of self-injury. Alternatively, you may just notice behavioral changes, such as chronic sadness, frequent crying, high levels of anxiety, withdrawal from people, decline in grades, or preoccupation with death or heaven. Your first response should be to take the threat extremely seriously. Suicidal comments are cries for help when someone feels overwhelmed by burdens. Show concern, provide comfort, and listen in a calm, sympathetic way. Be non-judgmental and patient. It is a good idea to treat the matter with extreme caution. Your friend might be in imminent danger. A safe response would be to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 800-SUICIDE or 800-273-TALK. If the individual is not in immediate danger, you still need to get your friend to see a physician, college counselor, or mental health care professional as soon as possible. Source: American Psychological Association, 2014. Data from Canada provide a slightly different picture of the patterns of mental illness in youth. Although the reported incidence of mental health disorders in youth is lower than that estimated in the United States, the type of disorders seen are also different. A total of 15% of the 937,000 children and youth living in British Columbia were estimated to have a mental health problem. Waddell and Shepard, 2002. In that sample, anxiety disorders were the most common, followed by conduct disorder, CD, ADHD, and depression. Anxiety disorders include reactions to a specific trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, generalized anxiety, social phobias, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and panic disorders. Conduct disorder, CD, refers to persistent and repeated violations of social rules and the rights of others. It often involves aggression toward others, animal abuse, theft or property destruction, deceitfulness, impulsive behavior, and a lack of empathy. The problem is 2 to 4 times more common in boys than girls. Moffat, Caspi, Rutter, and Silver, 2001. Not all children with CD have the same types of symptoms or show the same pathway. For some children with CD, it begins by age 10 and continues into adulthood. For others, it is limited to adolescence, as individuals gradually cease involvement in delinquent behavior by late adolescence. Moffat, 1993. Early onset CD has been linked to poor parenting and parental antisocial behavior as well as neurological deficits. Moffat, 1993. Youth violence and delinquency. Youth violence is a serious and pervasive problem in the United States. During adolescence, violence is perpetrated and experienced in many ways: bullying and school fights, date violence and rape, robbery, theft, drug dealing, and even homicide. These problems occur in every setting, but all too often, even schools are not safe environments. Bullying continues to be a pervasive problem in schools, as discussed in the last chapter. In a nationally representative sample of 20,000 students in the United States, 16% reported they had been bullied at some time in school. Limber, Olweus, and Luxembourg, 2013. In addition to violence, the presence of drugs and weapons in high schools is also high. 25% of students reported being exposed to illegal drugs at schools, and 10% of male students revealed they had been threatened or injured with a weapon on school property in the past year. Dinks et al., 2007, see photo 10.4. With the advent of adolescence comes dating. By the 8th and 9th grades, many adolescents have begun dating, and with dating, in a startlingly high number of cases, comes violence. Determining prevalence rates of violent behavior is difficult due to variations across studies on different dimensions: physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, stalking, including definitions of violence, the time period of the violent act, past year, lifetime, the sample characteristics, and the methodology: interview versus questionnaire, retrospective versus prospective. A recent nationally representative sample of 2,203 10th graders revealed that 35% reported being a victim of dating violence, and 31% reported perpetrating either physical or verbal violence toward their dates. Haney et al., 2013. When an adolescent persists in violent or antisocial behavior, he or she is labeled a delinquent. But delinquency does not begin in adolescence. Its roots are sometimes evident as early as toddlerhood. Therefore, it is useful to examine developmental trajectories when analyzing the origins of delinquent youth. There is currently considerable debate in the research literature about the nature of the developmental pathways leading to violence in adolescence. Lober and Stouthamer. Lober, 1998. Tremblay et al., 2004. The evidence clearly indicates that there is not just one pathway toward delinquency. There are several pathways that reflect differences in when the aggression began, early versus late onset, whether the violence is reactive or proactive, and the nature of the violence or aggression, for example breaking parental rules, truancy, physical fights, shoplifting, property damage, burglary, drug dealing, or weapons use, for example Barker, Tremblay, Nagin, Vitero, and Lacourse, 2006. One set of pathways to delinquency was proposed by researchers who have extensively studied adolescent aggression. The most common pathway is that of authority conflict. It also begins the earliest and has its roots in stubborn behavior in toddlers and preschoolers. Kelly, Lober, Keenan, and De Lameta, 1997. That obstinacy then leads to defiance and disobedience before morphing into adolescent authority avoidance acts, such as breaking parental rules by staying out late, truancy, school absenteeism, and running away from home. A second pathway is overt aggression. The onset of this behavior comes later than the authority conflict pathway. It begins with minor aggression, such as bullying. As the youth gets older, aggression is expressed as physical fighting, either individually or in gangs. Finally, the aggression escalates into serious violence, including rapes. The third pathway, also emerging later than the authority conflict, can be called covert aggression. It begins with minor dishonest behavior, such as shoplifting and frequent lying. As these youth get older, they engage in property damage, such as breaking objects or setting fires. As an adolescent, the severity of the actions can escalate into drug dealing and engaging in such behaviors as fraud, burglary, and theft. Although the causes of these three different delinquent pathways are not entirely understood, it is likely that the roles parents play in them may be different. How parents help teens navigate adolescence. How do parents help their children survive the adolescent years? Effective parenting of adolescents requires a balance between maintaining some oversight and control while encouraging independence and responsibility in preparation for adulthood. Although some parents may disengage when their children become teenagers, the evidence is that effective parents continue to play an important role in helping their youth successfully navigate the hazards of adolescence. The research into parenting and adolescent well-being has uncovered certain parenting processes that evidently work, which will be covered here. Diana Baumrind, 1991, 2005, was one of the first researchers to examine links between the quality of child rearing and adolescent competence using longitudinal data.